Hello friends! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. Nobody in Red Pine County talks about that day anymore, but someone has to remember. Someone has to know the truth before it's buried under polite smiles, forged memories, and stubborn denial. 24 years have passed, and most folks have moved on, pretending that afternoon in late September never happened. But I haven't. I was driving the backup bus that day, following behind Lillian Marrow's usual route through the dense pine woods that stretch between Bitter Creek and the county line. Those trees grow so thick that even at noon, the sky is just a muted wash of gray-green. Lillian and I had been friends since our daughters were in kindergarten together. She'd been driving bus number 19 for over a decade, without so much as a fender scratch. That morning, she complained about a migraine, blaming the change in weather. I offered to take the route, but she waved me off with a laugh, saying she'd handled worse storms in her career. The storm hit around 3:15, faster than anyone could have expected. One moment, the air was sticky and quiet. The next, sheets of rain tore across the road like angry ribbons, and the wind bent the pine trees until their tops scraped each other in a low, gnashing whisper. The radio crackled with warnings. Find shelter immediately. I pulled into the empty lot of an old gas station, my windshield turning into a wall of water, and tried to reach Lillian on the radio. At first, there was only static, sharp and electric enough to make your teeth ache, but then her voice cut through, calm and almost cheerful. "I found a place," she said, "just a mile off Pine Ridge Road. Kids are fine, maybe a little scared, but singing songs. Everything's okay." I blinked against the rain, confused. That stretch of road had nothing. No buildings, no houses, no church, nothing but trees and deer trails as far as I could see. I told her she must be mistaken, maybe meant the Baptist church near Old Mill Road. She insisted she knew the exact location, describing it with meticulous detail. A white clapboard church with forest green shutters, a copper-roofed bell tower shaped like a rooster, and an elderly couple who welcomed them inside. She spoke of sugar cookies and warm apple cider, of paper dolls and checkers, of children laughing under dry towels while the lightning raged outside. Her voice was so ordinary, so warm and calm that I started questioning my own memory. Maybe there had been something there I never noticed. By the time the storm passed, about 50 minutes later, the sun returned like nothing had happened, casting ghostly mist over the wet asphalt. I drove back along Pine Ridge Road, checking every logging trail and dirt path, but there was nothing. No church, no sign of life, other than my own tire tracks in the mud. I radioed dispatch. By the time I finished speaking, 3 sheriff deputies and half the volunteer fire department were combing the woods. We searched until the sun began to set, painting the pines a rusty orange. Then Deputy Carlton's voice came over the radio, shaky and strange. "They found the bus," he said. It was 15 miles off where Lillian said they were, deep enough into the woods that even the search helicopter almost missed it. The bus was parked perfectly, between 2 rows of towering loblolly pines, engine off, emergency door hanging open. Lillian was behind the wheel, eyes wide and unseeing, not responding to anyone. Her hands were still gripping the wheel. They had to pry them loose, one by one. 8 children sat in their assigned seats, humming the same tune in perfect unison. When deputies stepped aboard, they turned their heads together, like a single organism, smiling identical smiles that made everyone's chest tighten, but 3 were missing. Kevin Malone, age 7, with a mop of sandy hair and a love for dinosaurs. Ruby Caldwell, 9, wearing a sun-yellow dress and her glasses sliding down her nose. And Theo Ramirez, 8, the spelling bee champion of the county. Their seats were empty, yet the other children acted like they were still there, speaking to them as if they never left. When Sheriff Morrison asked what had happened, all 8 kids recited the exact same words, in the exact same order. We stayed with the kind people. They gave us cookies. Child psychologists, trauma specialists, and experts in collective delusion were called in. They spoke of shared memory, hysteria, even mass suggestion. But none could explain how children from different families could remember the same couple, the same church interior, the same cookies, the same orange tabby cat that had brushed against their legs. They drew the same pictures, down to the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a bird in flight. The children could not, or would not, explain how they traveled from Pine Ridge Road to the hidden logging trail or what had occurred during those lost hours. Parents begged for answers, some screaming, some weeping silently. The children hummed their hymn, spoke of the cookies, and smiled politely, offering no further explanation. Then came the discovery of their backpacks. Kevin's was found in Arkansas, perfectly dry, the pencils arranged by size, lunch money folded neatly. Ruby's appeared in a thrift store in Oklahoma, homework completed in a handwriting that was hers but sharper, more deliberate. Theo's was found in a Louisiana state park, 20 feet up in a tree, his spelling trophy polished, along with a note. "Thank you for the cookies." Lillian never spoke again. Doctors found nothing physically wrong with her, no damage to her vocal cords or brain. But she would sit in the psychiatric facility gesturing, mouthing words, laughing at invisible jokes. Her husband brought her home after 6 months. She lived another 4 years, never speaking until the night she died. That night she pointed at the corner of the room, smiling, and whispered her first and last words. "They're here for me now." The children went back to school and seemingly resumed normal lives, but the oddities persisted. Each day at 2:47 p.m., they would stop what they were doing, staring into nothingness for exactly 3 minutes, lips moving as if reciting that same hymn. At night, they would stand at windows, waving to darkness. When asked, they only said, "The kind people." Families gradually moved away, scattering across the country, trying to outrun whatever had touched their children. But wherever they went, the behavior persisted. Waving at shadows, humming the same hymn, stopped in unison every day. Kevin, Ruby, and Theo were never found, though sightings continued. A truck driver in Nevada swore he saw them hand in hand with an elderly couple, eternally the same age, looking through him rather than at him. A waitress in Montana served them breakfast. Polite, silent, paying with 1950s bills that were unnaturally pristine. The sightings stopped after a few years, but every September, when the first cold front moves in and the storms return, I drive out along Pine Ridge Road. I sit by the logging trails where Lillian had said the church stood, and sometimes, just sometimes, when the thunder rolls right, I hear the faintest sound of children singing. I've learned to leave the woods be, to not seek out the church, to avoid the edges of memory and reality. But Red Pine County will always remember, and I cannot forget. February in West Texas feels like the edge of the world. I remember standing on 70 acres of scrubland outside the tiny town of Coyote Flats, staring at the tumbleweeds as they rolled past my late uncle's weathered ranch house. I had just turned 35 that winter, exhausted from years of coding in Austin, watching my marriage crumble over 60 to 70-hour work weeks and broken promises. Then the call came. Uncle Harold's lawyer informing me that I'd inherited the ranch, a remote, dusty property 5 miles outside Coyote Flats. No traffic, no co-workers breathing down my neck. Just open land and quiet so absolute you could hear your own pulse in the morning. Harold had lived out there alone for 20 years after retiring from the oil business. We weren't close, but he'd always sent birthday cards with neatly folded $100 bills inside, signed in his shaky, precise handwriting. The first week was rough. The well pump sputtered, the generator refused to start when the lights went out, and I was still learning the rhythms of a property that seemed determined to resist my presence. That's when Mr. Calvert arrived. He appeared in a rusted Chevy pickup that had seen more decades than I had. Wore old denim overalls, his pale gray eyes catching the sunlight like twin slivers of ice. He lived just down the dirt road, maybe 5 miles from my place. Tall, thin, sun-leathered skin, and a peculiar stillness when he moved, like a scarecrow taught to walk and speak. "I knew your uncle," he said the first day, helping me coax the generator to life. "Good man, smart, quiet." He offered to help with chores, even brought over a casserole once. I never saw a wife, though he insisted she made it. He said he'd known Harold for 18 years. Cheered on him regularly, especially as his health declined. I appreciated the help. Honest, naive maybe. 3 weeks in, while cleaning the barn, I found 4 trail cameras hidden behind rusted feed bins and dusty paint cans. Batteries dead, but the memory cards intact. I assumed Harold had used them to watch for coyotes or gas thieves. That evening, I popped them into my laptop while waiting for code to compile. The first camera showed normal ranch life. Deer wandering among mesquite trees. A roadrunner darting across the dirt path. The second camera made me drop my coffee. Timestamp, 3 years prior. The camera was inside the house, aimed down the main hallway, and there he was, Calvert, walking casually at 2 a.m., moving with the precision of someone who owned the place. My first thought, maybe Harold had given him a key. That would make sense, but as I clicked through more footage, I realized he appeared every week, always at night, always moving like he belonged. One night 2 years ago, he stood in Harold's bedroom doorway for 17 minutes just watching him sleep. The night vision turned his eyes into glowing, pale orbs. I held my breath as I watched him, a shadow observing an old man's fragile life, then turn and leave, as silently as he came. The pattern repeated month after month, year after year. I combed through Harold's papers for clues. Death certificate, natural causes, heart failure in his sleep. But the vet receipts were different. Harold had 3 dogs over the last 2 years. Duke, a lab mix, Bramble, a German shepherd, and Scout, another shepherd. All poisoned, all found by Calvert, all allegedly accidents. Every time, he called Harold to break the news and help bury them near the mesquite grove. The final dog's death coincided with a sharp decline in Harold's health. That afternoon, I changed every lock. Deadbolts, chain locks, steel bars. 3 nights later, I awoke to scraping on the doors, metal against metal. Footsteps around the house. Front door, kitchen, backsliding porch. My phone barely had a signal. The sheriff was 45 minutes away. I sat in the living room, shotgun across my lap, until dawn. Boot prints lined every window. Someone had tried to pick the locks but abandoned the attempt. The barn had always felt wrong. That morning, I searched every corner. Behind a false wall, I found a padlocked trap door. My new keys didn't fit. Crowbar, the stench of mildew, mothballs, and something foul greeted me. Ladder down, storm cellar. Concrete walls, plastic sheeting, recent blankets, canned goods, jugs of water, even a chemical toilet. Someone had been living here. Recently, photo albums on a table. Hundreds of pictures of Harold. Breakfast, TV, sleeping in his chair. Spiral notebooks in cramped handwriting. Daily logs of Harold's habits, routines, conversations. Then it shifted. Entries detailing how Calvert expected the ranch, that Harold had promised it to him, that he had to remove obstacles, the dogs, detailed methods of poisoning, final entries, patience, waiting, calculating. Old men die in their sleep, especially with certain heart medications. I grabbed the albums and notebooks, climbed back up, shaking. I had to get to town. Sheriff, evidence. When I emerged, his truck blocked my car. He leaned against it, arms crossed, stillness like a living scarecrow. "Thought you'd be smarter than Harold," he said softly. "Cameras, suspicions. It's a shame." I saw the outline of something in his pocket. He spoke of the ranch's future, of Harold's true intentions. My gut told me he would kill me if I stayed. I ran, slamming the bedroom window behind me. Through mesquite and thorn, I circled to his truck, keys in ignition. I shoved my belongings in, floored it down the dirt road to Presidio. Sheriff's office, evidence, footage, photos, arrest. They found more at his property. Harold's missing will. Everything left to me, not him. Calvert got 25 years to life for murder. They could only prove what he did to Harold, not his plans for me. 6 months later, I sold the ranch to a young couple from Houston who wanted goats. I didn't tell them about the seller. Some things, I decided, were best discovered, or not. I work in Dallas now, triple-checking locks every night. Phone always charged. I occasionally dream of those 17 minutes of footage. Calvert in green night vision, perfectly still, watching, waiting. Some inheritances come with more than you bargain for. Some neighbors are far closer than the eye can see. The cracked mud of Lake Redstone clung to the soles of my boots as I walked across what had once been a thriving reservoir. 70 acres of dry, sun-baked earth stretched farther than I could see, with only the occasional dead mesquite tree casting skeletal shadows on the red-brown ground. It had been 2 years since water last touched this land, and as an environmental consultant, I was here to study the consequences. Soil erosion, sediment displacement, and the relentless grip of the Texas drought. By my 4th day surveying the Western Basin, I had filled 3 notebooks with precise measurements. My truck's dashboard was coated in dust, a 1/4-inch layer that stubbornly persisted, despite keeping the windows closed. The reservoir, once filled with weekend boaters and spring break revelers, was now silent except for the rhythmic crunch of my boots on cracked mud and the occasional wind that carried the scent of earth, baked too long. I had been photographing strange circular patterns where whirlpools must have formed during the last drainage when my boot struck something solid beneath the silt. At first I thought it was debris, old camping gear or discarded lumber. But as I knelt to inspect it, the shape became horrifyingly clear. A human rib cage partially visible under a layer of dust and hardened mud. The shirt on the remains was once a Western-style pearl snap, faded to the color of weak tea, buttons still glinting in the harsh sunlight. A wallet chain dangled from the belt loops of what remained of denim jeans. The skull rested sideways, jaw unhinged, as if screaming silently at the scorched earth beneath it. I had seen dead cattle and mummified coyotes before, but nothing prepares you for the reality of human remains. My mind raced. Who had vanished here, and how long had they been waiting to be found? I backed away slowly, trying to keep my breathing steady, and dialed county dispatch from my satellite phone. The signal was barely alive, but I managed to get through. 40 minutes later, Sheriff Hollingsworth arrived with 2 deputies and a crime scene photographer who looked as though he'd already given up on life under the Texas sun. Hollingsworth was a classic small-town lawman, belly hanging over his belt, sweat-stained uniform, eyes that had probably seen everything this part of the state could throw at him. He took one look at the body and muttered about the jurisdictional nightmare. The reservoir spanned 3 counties. While we waited for the forensics team from Austin, I explained my work. State-contracted soil surveys, full permits, landowner notification, all routine. He nodded, but seemed distracted, scanning the lake bed. Then he froze. About 30 yards away, something caught his attention. "Stay here," he ordered. I followed at a distance anyway, curiosity mixed with dread. What we found were bodies. 2 more, then another, partially buried under collapsed banks. By the time the forensics team arrived, 17 corpses had been flagged across a quarter-mile stretch, scattered like a macabre gallery. Some were dressed in clothing from decades past. A 1960s shift dress, pillbox hat, a polyester dress straight from the disco era. Others wore modern athletic wear, moisture-wicking fabrics with tags still attached, proof that whatever had begun decades ago was not yet finished. Every body carried a card laminated in plastic, tucked carefully in a pocket. Bible verses, ominous warnings in faded typewriter fonts, ominous lines about judgment, sin, and punishment. One read, "For the wages of sin is death," printed in red ink. The lamination yellowed with age, yet surprisingly intact. The team needed all my photographs, my soil surveys, my documentation of water levels and erosion patterns to establish approximate timelines. Diane, the forensics team lead, exuded a calm efficiency, the kind of person who delivers bad news without allowing panic to seep into the room. She treated the evidence with clinical care but spoke just enough like a human to make it bearable. The landowner, Gary Westcott, held the key to understanding the situation. His family had owned thousands of acres here, long before the reservoir existed. Old Texas. Money with oil, cattle, and influence that extended into local politics. The sheriff's face tightened when I mentioned him. Gary had stopped by my worksite days earlier, seemingly polite, offering water and small talk, but I had noted how he photographed my license plate with his phone. That night I returned to my motel, haunted by the thought that the modern corpse, one in clothes bought in the last few years, meant someone had continued this grim practice recently. The fear was not just historical. It was alive, immediate, and directed at me. The next morning I drove to the Westcott Ranch, a sprawling limestone estate with metal roofs and wraparound porches. Gary's mother answered the door, a woman in her 70s with wheat-colored hair and blood-red nails. She offered iced tea and small talk, all while her eyes tracked me like a hawk. Eventually, she led me to a photo album showing me the ranch in decades past and, disturbingly, a small chapel built from limestone with a cross of railroad spikes. She began recounting stories of her father-in-law, a man of profound faith who preached salvation to wandering women, those without family or place. Her emphasis on certain words made my stomach knot. Then she opened a stack of old leather journals, names, dates, Bible verses in red ink. Women who had vanished in nearby towns, cases never solved, and whose bodies now partially rested in the drying lake bed. Gary arrived quietly, boots heavy, filling the room with an unspoken threat. "You've seen the archives," he said, voice flat. "My father made sure families had closure. Nothing more, nothing less." His positioning subtly blocked the door, a silent warning. I claimed I needed to return to my equipment, and he allowed it, suggesting I rely on aerial imagery instead. The message was clear. Stay away. By the afternoon, back at the reservoir, I found something that confirmed the threat. A laminated card under my windshield wiper. My name. A verse from Proverbs about the strange woman whose house leads to ruin, still warm from the laminating machine. Fresh tire tracks led from the Westcott Ranch. I left Texas that day, straight to Austin, highway blurring beneath me. I called my company, feigning illness, requesting a replacement to finish the survey. I stayed with family in Houston for 3 weeks, monitoring news reports. The stories vanished as quickly as they began. Sheriff Hollingsworth retired abruptly. The new sheriff classified the cases as cold. Diane relocated to Maine, and Gary Westcott continues to maintain his ranch, his white truck a constant on the roads. The limestone chapel still standing, surrounded by tire tracks that show up on every satellite image. I never returned to field work. Now I sit in an office, reviewing reports instead of measuring erosion. Yet I can't ignore the memory of the cards, the corpses, and the certainty that some traditions in small-town Texas persist quietly, waiting for the next drought to reveal them. Everyone in Redwater knew better than to cross Mayor Harlan, but I never realized how deadly silence could be until people began vanishing. I ran the only hardware store in town, Caldwell Hardware, a place my father passed down to me nearly 20 years ago, just as my son, Jonah, was born. I thought Redwater, tucked deep in West Texas, with barely 850 residents, would be the perfect place to raise a family. A town where everyone knew your business, often before you did. The Friday night football game at Redwater High was the social hub, the one night a week where everyone congregated. Mayor Harlan had been unopposed for decades, his influence spreading like veins through the town's institutions, water management, school boards, even law enforcement. Folks either loved him or learned quickly to keep quiet. The first disappearance came in March. Old Carl Whitman, sharp as a tack. Carl had confronted the mayor during a monthly council meeting about the doubling of his property taxes. While half the streetlights on his block didn't work, Harlan offered that practiced smile, eyes empty but polite. 2 weeks later, Carl's truck was found abandoned on Route 89. Keys in the ignition, wallet on the dashboard, and Carl gone. Sheriff Gaines chalked it up to confusion, maybe early dementia, but I knew Carl was as sharp as ever. Then came Sylvia Mendez in April, the woman who ran the bakery on Main Street. She had the audacity to question why the mayor's construction company had won the school renovation contract with no competitive bidding. Sylvia brought spreadsheets, detailed estimates, calculations showing the town could have saved almost $250,000 if they'd hired a firm from Midland. Harlan thanked her for her diligence, complimented the cookies she'd baked, and the matter seemed closed. 3 weeks later, her sister came into my store, tear-streaked, saying Sylvia had left to care for a sick relative in Mexico, though her family had been in Texas for generations. By June, Carl Hendricks challenged zoning near the mayor's ranch. A large man, former oil rig worker turned farmer, not the type to vanish willingly. 17 days later, his wife bought rope and duct tape at my store, paid cash, avoided eye contact, and walked out like a trance-bound automaton. That's when I realized the pattern wasn't random. In July, I installed security cameras, 8 for the store, 2 at home, covering every angle. Insurance reasons, I told my wife, Marcy, though I was more concerned about proof. For weeks, the feeds were mundane: delivery trucks, regular customers, stray cats. Then, in early August, everything changed. Tom Ashcroft, 30 years old, new to ranching, dared to question the mayor's water restrictions at a town meeting, specifically why the country club was exempt, while local ranchers were fined for watering livestock. Harlan's response was chilling. No smile, just a steady stare, a warning hidden beneath polite words. 19 days later, 3:47 a.m., my front door camera pinged with motion. I froze. 3 unmarked white vans crept down Oak Street. No plates, no logos. 12 men emerged, identical in black uniforms, moving with uncanny precision. They didn't smash doors, they didn't break windows. They simply entered Tom's house. 23 minutes later, they emerged with Tom and his family. blank-faced, carrying boxes, albums, and any evidence of their existence. I grabbed my laptop, duplicated the footage, uploaded it, but the files became corrupted, except the originals on the store's hard drive. I arrived at Caldwell Hardware before sunrise. The signs of intrusion were subtle. A rearranged stack of paint cans, a key on a different hook, my office door fully open. The recording had a 43-minute gap, precisely when the vans would have passed my store. Jonah came home from school later, speaking of friendly men, asking about our home, my work, even the camera models I had installed. He laughed it off, but I could see the fear in his eyes. That night, I barely slept. At 3:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with another alert. The front door, always locked, was now ajar, swaying in the wind. The interior camera feed showed black nothingness. I ran upstairs. Jonah and Marcy were safe. Doors locked from inside. Back downstairs, a single sheet of pristine paper rested on the kitchen table. Typed words, no signature, no letterhead. Your family seems lovely, especially Jonah. We hope Redwater continues to be peaceful. The town meeting is next Monday. We trust you will have no concerns regarding recent departures. Sometimes the best hardware stores are the quiet ones. I burned the paper, packed what we could, and we left Redwater that morning, claiming a spontaneous trip to visit family in Colorado. We never returned. 2 months later, a cousin informed me that Caldwell Hardware had burned down in an electrical fire. Mayor Harlan personally oversaw the cleanup, ensuring nothing dangerous remained. Even now, years later, I replay the footage in my mind. The empty streets, the vans, the mechanical efficiency of 12 men erasing lives as if rehearsing choreography. Redwater seems quaint on the map, but I know the truth. Beneath its slow-moving routines lies a precision method of control, a terror wrapped in small-town familiarity. And I can't help but wonder how many more will disappear the next time someone questions the mayor's authority. Our town, Harrows Creek, still talks about that miraculous championship season as if it were a dream. But I know better. I was there for every play, every meeting, every late-night discussion. In the locker room, I was number 58 on the offensive line, graduated in 2015, and watched everything fall apart that summer. We weren't supposed to win a single playoff game that year. The town, barely 4,200 people, existed on the rhythm of small-town routines. The Dairy Queen closed at 8, the gas station shut by 9, and Friday night football wasn't a pastime, it was a religion. The boosters ran the show, old men in leather jackets from decades ago, still clutching memories of their glory days, now wielded influence with bank accounts funded by oil leases, car dealerships, and land speculation. At the time, I didn't understand how far their reach extended. I would learn painfully just how deep the rot went. It became clear during the semi-final game when I noticed Coach Ralston pulling Carson Murdoch aside between plays. Carson, our starting quarterback, was the son of the local district attorney. Smart, sharp, athletic, and careful. Unlike some of us, he earned his grades honestly. I watched him during those sideline conversations, head down, nodding silently, never meeting the coach's eyes. We won that semi-final, 38-7, which should have been impossible, against a team stacked with Division I talent. In the locker room afterward, Carson stayed behind, pads still on, helmet gripped so tightly his knuckles were pale. I asked if he was okay. "We're going to pay for this," he said softly. I laughed it off, thinking he meant the pressure of the championship. I wish I had asked what he really meant. 2 weeks later, the state championship. From kickoff, the game felt wrong. Their best defensive end injured in the first quarter. Routine play, knee collapses. Their quarterback fell ill at halftime. By the fourth quarter, our lead was 40 points, and the crowd's jubilation felt hollow, tense. Standing on the field as confetti rained, I noticed the boosters grouped near midfield. Vernon Hale, Chip Langley, and two others, their eyes cold and calculating, observing us like farmers counting newly purchased cattle. When Vernon's gaze met mine, he nodded slowly. My stomach turned. The first incident came shortly after graduation. Troy Sandberg, our middle linebacker, had a full ride to a junior college. In mid-June, his truck rolled off County Road 12. No skid marks, no brake marks, no evidence of driver error. Troy never drove tired, never drove recklessly. At the viewing, his mother grabbed my arm and whispered, "They did this." He was going to talk. I didn't understand, but her eyes, red from days of crying, and her shaking voice left a cold weight in my chest. Vernon and Chip were there during the service, observing silently, arms crossed. 3 weeks later, Curtis Jensen, our running back, drowned at Miller Quarry. Curtis hated deep water, never swam without a life jacket. His clothes were folded neatly on the rocks. His phone, left in the truck, had deleted texts, conversations erased. Then, Blake Callahan, our tight end and Division I hopeful, died in a fire in late July. Electrical failure, the report said, though his father, a contractor, kept the house meticulously maintained. Blake had called me 2 days earlier, terrified, insisting we meet in person. He never arrived. Across the street, the boosters watched the fire, quiet and composed. Vernon's eyes locked on mine as I drove past. After Blake's death, his little brother, 14-year-old Simon, rode 4 miles to my house early one morning. He handed me a USB drive Blake had given him, instructing him to hide it and only give it to someone he trusted. Sitting at my kitchen table, I finally opened it. Video files of practices, locker room talks, booster meetings, voice memos, text, screenshots, proof of grade changes, steroid distribution, gambling debts, and intimidation. The 4 of them, Troy, Curtis, Blake, and Carson, had planned to come forward after securing scholarships. They were found out. The boosters had rigged games through intimidation, grade manipulation, and performance enhancers. They had bet massive sums. When we won state, they profited enormously. Troy, Curtis, Blake, and Carson wanted to expose them, and someone ensured that would never happen. I drove to the state police barracks 2 hours north. Detective Barnes and her partner listened for hours, copied the USB, assured me of discretion. Then, a week later, Carson was hit by a black Ford pickup while jogging, a hit and run that left him paralyzed. He whispered to me, "They got me too. I'm the last one left." His father, district attorney, would have been in danger. The boosters controlled the sheriff, perhaps half the judges. We were trapped. Carrying the USB drive felt like holding fire. I couldn't go to the local police. I couldn't put Carson's father at risk. I submitted the drive to federal investigators. Chain of custody, documentation, witnesses for every handoff. 8 months later, indictments. Vernon Hale, Chip Langley, Coach Ralston, and 4 others, including the sheriff, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, witness tampering. Carson testified from his wheelchair, his courage giving life to the memory of Troy, Curtis, and Blake. Sentences ranged from 8 to 25 years. Harrow's Creek is quieter now. Football under strict oversight, academic standards enforced, boosters sidelined. The town pretends that championship season never happened. But I remember. Blake's little brother is now studying criminal justice, determined to protect others the way his brother tried. Some nights I replay the files in my head, thinking how close we were to letting it all vanish. But when I recall Carson in court, pointing at Vernon and saying, "That man killed my friends," I know we did what we could. We preserved the truth, no matter the cost. Journalism had always promised me truth, justice, and the thrill of uncovering secrets. That's what they told us at the University of Texas in Austin when I studied investigative reporting. I thought I was ready for anything. I wasn't. When I graduated in 2015, I envisioned myself digging into corporate scandals, political corruption, and stories that could change lives. Instead, for 6 years, I wrote about parking disputes in Austin neighborhoods, local school events, and city council debates. Nothing that mattered beyond a few annoyed residents and minor Facebook arguments. So when a position opened at the Dry Creek Sentinel in January 2024, I jumped. Dry Creek was a tiny town in central Texas, population just over 2,800. The paper was old, the office small, a single-story brick building with a rusted tin sign. It was me, the editor, Harold McBride, and a part-time photographer named Ruth. Harold was pushing 65, had thinning silver hair, and an endless collection of plaid shirts. Ruth doubled as layout designer, photographer, and occasional office cleaner. She was always humming softly, like she was part of the building. My desk had belonged to someone named Tessa Wren. Harold mentioned it casually, almost like a warning. Tessa had worked there for 12 years, covering local politics and agriculture. She had died in a car accident 6 months prior, single-vehicle crash on Highway 87, heading home after a county commissioners' meeting. Harold's voice faltered when he said it, but he tried to hide it. Sitting at her old desk felt wrong. Her notebooks were stacked neatly, written in shorthand I couldn't read. Business cards were bundled with rubber bands, coffee mugs left behind, some with sarcastic phrases. I logged into her computer with the account Harold had reset for me, and the sense of inhabiting someone else's life weighed on me. Dry Creek itself looked peaceful, almost too perfect. Main Street had the usual small-town mix: a diner called Mabel's Kitchen, a hardware store, a gas station, 2 churches, and a bar named the Rusted Horseshoe, where locals gathered for politics and gossip. People were polite, but their eyes were sharp, careful. It wasn't friendliness. It was vigilance. The drought had been cruel for 4 years straight. Farms struggled, water was scarce, and foreclosures dotted the county records. My first month passed quietly. County meetings, the local high school basketball teams run to regionals, interviews with the feed store owner about rising costs. All small town stuff, but I noticed one man commanded respect in every gathering: Dean Rourke, the chair of the county commission. Mid-50s, tall, silver hair slicked back, always in perfectly polished boots. Before politics, he'd been a banker. People talked about him with a mix of awe and unease. At a commission meeting, I watched him shut down a farmer's protest about irrigation rights with a mere smile. The farmer left defeated, shoulders slumped, voice lost in the room. Curiosity and boredom led me to dig through Tessa Wren's files in March. Harold had me working on a piece about the drought's impact, and I hoped her notes might help. Her system was meticulous. Color-coded folders, cross-referenced notes, timelines, and legal pads. Then I found one folder tucked in the back, unlabeled. Inside were property records, foreclosure notices, and a web of names connected by arrows and annotations. At the top, underlined 3 times, Redwood Holdings LLC. Beneath it, Silver Mesa Partners, and then Lone Star Agrivist Group. Shell companies, from what I could tell. But next to each, same registered agent, same address. A mailbox in Waco, Texas, serviced by a lawyer named Philip Carver. Everything was legal on paper, but the pattern was unsettling. Cross-referencing the properties with county GIS maps, I realized they'd purchased 13 farms over 4 years, all in foreclosure, all near the deepest aquifer in the county. The next page of notes made my stomach knot. 4 names with dates: farmer suicides. Martin Caldwell, September 2023. Tom Harlan, February 2024. Victor Lane, November 2023. Jeff Ramsey, January 2024. Each had lost their farm to foreclosure months prior. Tessa had circled Martin Caldwell's name with a note. Water pressure dropped 3 months before foreclosure. Neighbors unaffected. Water pressure. In a drought-stricken agricultural town, water meant survival. A failing well destroyed crops, destroyed livelihoods, and sometimes, as the notes revealed, destroyed lives. I spent the next week combing public records, water rights permits, foreclosure filings, and loan documents. It was legal theft at its most elegant. Shell companies appearing as creditors, filing liens that seemed legitimate, but were untraceable to original debts. Dean Rourke's name popped up constantly, not as a buyer, but as witness, commissioner approving water transfers or signatory on documents. Always present, never directly involved. But he was orchestrating it, and Tessa had realized it before she died. Her final entry, November 10th, 2023. Just one word. Rourke. Notes. Meeting with source tomorrow. Proof. Then nothing. She never made it home. I knew I should stop, should walk away and focus on trivial county news. But curiosity and stubborn journalistic integrity drove me forward. I started interviewing families. Most refused. Some hung up. Some just cried silently. Martin Caldwell's widow, Agnes, invited me to her home. A modest trailer on the edge of town. The drought had stripped everything but her grief. Martin noticed it first in March 2023, she said, voice low, shaking hands wrapped around a mug. Water barely came out of the well. Pumps checked. Nothing wrong, just gone. Neighbors fine, just us, like someone turned it off underground. Dean Rourke had visited about a month later, offering assistance, restructuring loans. Martin refused. 2 weeks later, liens appeared from companies they'd never heard of. By harvest, the farm was gone. And Martin, he couldn't survive the loss. Victor Lane's brother told a similar story. Wells failing, Rourke showing up as savior, mysterious liens appearing. I drafted the story, trying to tie the evidence together without sounding paranoid. Small-town corruption is a masterclass in plausible deniability. Everything looked legitimate, but someone's life had been destroyed for profit. Then it arrived, a USB drive left on my desk in a plain manila envelope. No note, no return address. Inside, Redwood Holdings financial records, 2019 to 2024. Bank statements, wire transfers, incorporation papers, signatures linking the LLC to Rourke's brother-in-law, Lionel Graves, a commercial real estate agent in Austin. Predatory loans, water rights manipulation, profits funneled into joint accounts. Everything Tessa had tried to uncover. I called Harold. He sat, reading for nearly an hour, face pale. "If we run this," he said, voice barely audible, "we're accusing a sitting commissioner of fraud. Maybe worse. You understand that, right?" I did, but inaction felt like complicity. I copied the evidence to 3 drives. One went to the Austin American-Statesman, one to the Texas Attorney General, one to the FBI office in Dallas. Then I wrote a short piece for the Sentinel, vague but on record. Documents relating to possible county corruption have been submitted to authorities. Investigations are pending. That night, something appeared on my porch. A calf, 3 months old, throat cut so deep its head nearly detached. No note, just the message. Then a dog, then a goat. Each strategically placed so I couldn't miss it. Psychological warfare designed to terrorize. I stopped sleeping. Every sound, every shadow felt like Dean Rourke watching me. But the intimidation failed. I had already distributed the evidence. The animals stopped appearing after a week. 3 months later, the FBI arrived. Agents questioned Rourke, graves, and a county employee named Leo Benson, who had been tampering with wells. Federal charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, extortion, racketeering. State charges: abuse of public office, falsifying records. Trials were swift. Rourke received 17 years, Graves 12, Benson 6. Farms returned to families or auctioned with proceeds to victims. Justice was slow and partial, but it was there. I never learned who sent the USB drives. Someone with a conscience, or someone positioning themselves to exploit the chaos. I left Dry Creek 6 months after the arrests, taking a safer reporting job in Austin. I still think about Tessa, about the farmers, about the terror that came to my doorstep. Sometimes truth has a price. Sometimes it's more than anyone should pay. I never thought escaping the chaos of city life would lead me to something darker than anything I'd imagined. Pine Hollow, Texas, was the kind of town that looked like it had been untouched by time. Quaint streets, clapboard houses, and a tiny main square where the general store still had a wooden counter and dusty shelves. But I didn't come here for charm. I came to photograph rare birds. My name is Caleb Monroe, freelance wildlife photographer, quietly obsessed with spotting the uncatchable glimpses of life hidden deep in forests. The assignment that brought me here seemed perfect. 6 months in a remote cabin on the outskirts of Pine Hollow, documenting the elusive Swainson's warbler for a specialty magazine. The cabin itself was tucked into a small clearing, the kind that made you feel like the trees were walls, holding you in a secret that didn't want to be shared. Pine and oak stretched overhead, branches intertwining, making the sun patchy on the forest floor. The couple who rented it to me, Harland and Mavis Kendall, lived a mile deeper into the woods. They claimed their son handled the formalities from town, but never clarified exactly where. At first I didn't care. I had my solitude, my camera, and the forest. That was enough. The first week was almost comforting in its isolation. I'd wake with the dawn, pack my gear, and trudge through damp underbrush to hidden creeks where the warblers and kites darted just out of reach. Exhaustion came with satisfaction, a strange peace settling over me. But peace, I would soon learn, was only temporary in Pine Hollow. The first sign that something wasn't right was my tripod. Each night I left it folded neatly by the cabin door. Each morning it was propped near the kitchen wall, angled as if placed with careful consideration. I brushed it off, assuming sleepiness had led me to move it without noticing. But then I noticed the memory card from 2 days prior had been wiped. No errors, no corruption, just gone. I started stashing my cards in a small tin beneath my mattress, a precaution I didn't really believe would matter. Then came the footprints, bare feet, wide and oddly flat, toes gripping the earth like some primal hand had pressed into the soil. They circled the cabin loosely, looping near windows, then drifting back into thick brush. I set up motion-activated trail cameras to see if I could catch the nocturnal visitor. The first night yielded nothing unusual. A raccoon ambled around the fire pit, sniffing at ashes. But the second night changed everything. One camera caught a man standing between 2 pines, almost blending into shadows. He wasn't facing the cabin exactly, but turning his head slightly, listening. His posture was stiff, almost unnatural. The closer I zoomed in, the more the figure's details made my skin crawl. Slack face, eyes fixed as if sensing something beyond the camera. The next morning I showed the footage to Harland and Mavis. Their reaction was subtle, almost rehearsed. Mavis fidgeted with her apron. Harland offered a vague explanation about distorted images in wildlife cameras. I hadn't mentioned the figure's posture or shape, and yet their avoidance was clear. Night after night the man appeared closer, behind the woodpile near the rain barrel, always still, always just out of reach of full sight. On the fourth night, the image made me freeze. 20 feet from my porch, dirt-streaked clothes, haggard features, unmistakably familiar. I remembered a framed photo in the Kendalls' living room. A younger man holding a fishing rod, sun squinting in his eyes, smiling. The figure in my camera bore the same face, but hollow, older, lifeless. Daniel Kendall, their son, whom they had told me, died in a hunting accident 10 years ago. I confronted them the next morning. The woods were unnaturally still, like waiting. Mavis fiddled with a dish towel. Harlan stared at the table's grain. Daniel had died, they repeated. A rehearsed story they had recited countless times. But the man on my cameras was alive, present, breathing. I asked if anyone else could resemble him. No. Their insistence tightened the tension in my chest, a silent warning I couldn't ignore. I requested a closer picture of Daniel. Mavis hesitated, then brought the same frame from before. Differences were subtle but undeniable. The man outside my cabin had unkempt hair, sharper jawline, recent weight loss. Not aging from death, but something else. Returning to the cabin, unease wrapped around me like a thick cloak. I paused along a creek, trying to shake the creeping dread. But the forest followed. The memory cards, the tripod, the footprints, they all suggested intention, not accident. Then I found it. A small orange prescription bottle on the bathroom counter, not there that morning. Filled recently, addressed to Daniel Kendall. Alive, current. And the rental agreement revealed another detail. The signature, supposedly Mavis, had been overwritten. Beneath her name, faint indentations showed Daniel. He had signed it himself, then erased it with his mother's. Sleep became impossible. I watched the tree line every night, anticipating his arrival. By morning, leaving seemed the only choice. I packed frantically, abandoning routine care of lenses and clothes. The air carried a suffocating silence, punctuated only by my heartbeat. Outside, the trail cameras had been turned toward the ground, deliberately. Someone had moved them. My truck, my only exit, awaited, but the brake lines were severed. Clean cuts, calculated. I couldn't drive away. I couldn't risk walking past the house. The woods were alive with soft shifts, branches moving in time with my pacing. The instinct to flee was pure, primal. I grabbed my heaviest lens, not as a weapon but as leverage, and took the longer path around their property, avoiding the front altogether. Each step through dense underbrush was a battle against fear and exhaustion. A soft parallel movement caught my attention. Something was pacing me, cautious, slow, mirroring every step. I didn't dare look, not yet. The road out finally came into sight, but so did the house. Windows lit and expectant. Harlan and Mavis stepped outside, glances darting toward the woods in ways that tightened my chest. Their attention gave me the opening I needed. I slipped past the shed, across the clearing, and ran without looking back. 40 minutes of relentless sprinting through undergrowth before a distant engine provided salvation. A truck, dusty and utilitarian, stopped. The driver, a man hauling feed sacks, didn't question me, just opened the passenger door. I didn't look back until miles from Pine Hollow. Even then, the forest swallowed the road behind us, hiding its secrets. I never returned for my gear or the cabin key. The magazine later sent someone to retrieve my equipment. The cabin door was open, untouched. It was as if the forest, the Kendalls, and Daniel himself were waiting, patient, unseen. Somewhere deep in Pine Hollow, Daniel still walks. I've never seen anyone like him, alive and dead at once, and I pray never to again. Living in Southport Heights, a quiet retirement complex just outside Corpus Christi, Texas, was never part of my plan. After my aunt passed and left me her small condo, I moved in reluctantly. Most residents were decades older than me, and the contrast made the complex feel unusually calm, almost unnaturally so. It was a place where time seemed to drift slower, and the days passed in soft routines. I worked remotely, so my days were mostly spent observing the slow shuffle of walkers along the sidewalks, the community coffee brewing sweet enough to make my teeth ache, and the soft hum of the old ceiling fans that never seemed to stop. Everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least pretended to. Gossip traveled faster than weather changes, usually harmless, until the deaths started stacking up. At first, no one questioned it. Elderly residents passed on occasion, and families tried to accept it. But the pattern was unnerving. Every incident occurred during the same overnight shift, always with the same home health aide present. Her name was Harriet Crowley, a woman described by most as gentle, patient, and endlessly comforting. Her slow, measured speech could calm the most anxious hearts. I'd watch her wheeling her cart down the hall, humming melodies that didn't belong to any tune I recognized. Residents adored her. Then whispers began. One afternoon, a visitor knocked on my door, visibly exhausted. He explained that his mother's cherished necklace, always worn, had vanished after she passed. Staff claimed ignorance. Soon, more families reported missing rings, watches, and other valuables. Then a particularly damning revelation came: an amended life insurance policy, naming Harriet as a beneficiary. Tension rippled through the complex. Conversations paused when she entered a room, the air thick with unspoken suspicion. It wasn't long before things escalated. Emergency vehicles arrived repeatedly during her shifts. I watched one night from my window. Harriet standing outside, arms crossed, face calm, almost like a statue, comforting paramedics and relatives alike. Yet her calmness felt rehearsed, almost deliberate. The breaking point came with Leonard Graves, a retired pharmacist known for meticulous attention to detail. His cousin, living 2 doors from me, died unexpectedly during Harriet's shift. Leonard demanded medical sheets, pointing out inconsistencies in vitals, numbers that didn't match sudden collapse. He whispered about chemical imbalances, substances like potassium chloride, easily hidden unless scrutinized. Families dismissed him as a grieving relative, until he was proven right. Weeks later, an independent review revealed a pattern. 7 deaths over 18 months, all showing dangerously elevated potassium chloride levels, enough to induce cardiac arrest silently. The revelation hit the complex like a thunderclap. Some residents cried, others froze, unable to reconcile the warmth they'd trusted with the predator among them. The night I saw Harriet walking down the hall around 2 a.m., I understood. No humming, no friendly smile. Just her hands tucked in her pockets, eyes fixed ahead, moving slowly, like she was replaying something inside her mind. The hallway felt colder where she passed, the carpet's warmth somehow gone. I froze, holding the trash bag, unable to look away or move. When she was arrested, the complex gathered silently behind windows and door frames. Her hands were cuffed, her expression detached, calm, as if the chaos around her didn't exist. Reporters swarmed within hours, cameras and vans filling the entrance. Families confronted the administration, digging through files, photographs, and anything that could explain the horrors hidden in plain sight. Investigators later uncovered a small metal box in her locker, containing jewelry and trinkets from multiple residents, each piece meticulously placed on felt. Patterns in amended insurance forms revealed subtle, deliberate updates over months, always at night when residents were vulnerable. The complexity and patience behind it were terrifying. As for me, I couldn't stay. The complex felt brittle, haunted. Residents jumped at every sound, every creak, every cough. I doubled down on routines I hadn't needed before, locking doors, charging phones, avoiding the hall at night. Even new employees in scrubs sparked suspicion. No one wanted to meet in communal areas anymore. Too many secrets had been hidden in plain sight. I decided to move. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation, just a constant suffocating awareness that the walls carried memories I didn't want beside me. On my last day, I walked the courtyard one final time. Empty benches, wind barely stirring the hedges, and a silence so profound it felt physical. I thought about the residents Harriet comforted as they died, and how few could have realized what was truly happening behind her gentle facade. Even now, I can't forget her, the way she glided silently through the hallways as if carrying the weight of life and death with a soft smile. Whether it was malice, delusion, or something darker, I'll never know. But I learned that evil often wears kindness as a mask, moving unnoticed in the quietest corners of a small town. Living in Southport Heights taught me that horror doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, glides, and hums softly while you sleep, waiting for no one to notice. And when it finally emerges, it leaves silence, heavier than grief itself.